Good morning. Um, Today I'll be reading from Slash and Burn by Claudia Hernandez, a Salvadoran author. This was published by And Other Stories at some point in the very long pandemic year. It follows a nameless protagonist and her several nameless daughters through the war and post-war of a nameless country. This section is from the beginning, near chapter 5. And it sort of gives a short introduction to the protagonist's many daughters, and also to the dynamic of the village where they live in the post-war of this nameless country. On the day that children are given their grades, the other parents won't sit near them. They warn their kids to do the same every day in class. They don't want anything to set off the ex-combatants. They still believe they have weapons and that, at any moment, they could decide to finish what they started. The kids think their parents are exaggerating, but still don't go down to where the ex-combatants live. They don't go there, and they don't date their daughters, even if they think they're pretty, like her own 4 daughters are. The second of those girls is the one who looks most like her. Her body and hair are like hers at that age, and they share several mannerisms. They also have a similar character. If her second daughter had been older when she took her trip, she would have happily left her in charge of her sisters. The eldest, on the other hand, is a spitting image of her father, except without his courage, or hers. She's a good, strong girl who doesn't shirk work, but freezes at any sign of danger. It was more for her sake than any of the other girls that she decided to hire a señora to keep them company while she was gone. Even though her daughter had told her there was no need and insisted she spend that money in Paris instead. Her mother knew she wouldn't be able to deal with a man hounding her wherever she went, claiming first he'd make her his wife and then the mother of his children. She needed somebody to walk her to school and to their milpa, where they grew corn and beans. The señora she'd hired was perfect. As the daughter of the woman who had been the man's school teacher, she inspired in him a certain respect. The third daughter had her mother's face, but her body came from her father's side of the family. Though she hadn't fully developed yet, it was clear she'd be the tallest. She was quick to smile, but also to beat the kids at school with a stick whenever they bugged her about being an ex-combatant's daughter. She had made it her mission to protect her baby sister, though there was no need. The girl knew how to get smoothly in or out of any situation with the other kids, and no one ever picked a fight with her. She was so friendly that the villagers even invited her into their homes whenever she was out and about in that area on her own. They served her coffee and fed her whatever they had lying around, just to hear her chat about things that were ordinary but became funny when she talked about them. She would sing and dance for them if asked, and even used to put on shows when there was no one around. She didn't need an audience. She couldn't even picture the daughter in that other country, the one her neighbors had never met. Every time she'd spoken to her over the phone, it had been through an interpreter, who, she suspected, changed what her daughter said. Now and then he went quiet, and then said he didn't know how to translate the words her daughter had just spoken. The girl's tone seemed distant and a little bitter. The interpreter said that compared to her youngest daughter, anyone's tone would seem distant and bitter. He said it was also down to the language, that the people from the country where she lived sounded like that, especially over the phone, so she shouldn't feel confused or jump to any conclusions. She would try not to, and would then find herself unexpectedly wondering if her daughter in France was like her other daughters, who, after a certain age, couldn't even go out to buy bread without painted nails and perfect hair. If so, she must have taken after her. Even in wartime, tucked away in the mountains, she always had her hair done up nicely. At one of the villages they had visited, she'd managed to get hold of a bunch of colorful hair ties that stood out against her uniform. The people who'd taken care of them in return for their help had asked what she needed, what she wanted, so she'd told them. Whenever the supply sergeant asked if she needed anything, she always requested pastel-colored panties, like the ones she was given by a foreigner who had come to see them at the camp. But they always gave her the simplest of black pairs and scolded her for being vain at a time when the country needed full commitment from each and every one of them. They said this commitment meant making appropriate use of the funds their compañeros in the political sector had gotten hold of, and not spending them on trifles. She countered that her being in the mountains at all was better proof of her commitment than the panties she wanted, and that she needed a really good pair if she was going to stay. She also said she needed bras. Before then, at home, she'd looked down her nose at those contraptions, unable to see the point. But with time and the way her body had developed, she came to need them, especially for running. Being men, they wouldn't understand, but they could go ahead and ask any woman in her situation. They must have done just that, because a few days later they gave her two good quality black bras with a little ornament on them that she played with whenever she had time on her hands. Her greatest treasure, which she kept in her rucksack, was a small mirror given to her by her aunt, who knew her well and understood her needs. She'd sent it by her husband, who'd taken a while to get it to her because they kept missing each other in the camps and mission areas. This, and later her fondness for skin creams, gave her a reputation in the camps for being a flirt. The men teased her, while the women got her whatever they could to spoil her. She was everyone's girl. Thank you for listening.